A short time ago, President Trump attended the dignified transfer of 4 U.S. service members killed in Iranian attacks in recent days. 3 of them died on an air base in Jordan, 1 on an air base in Iraq. This morning, their families and loved ones gathered at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware, where their remains were returned to the U.S. in transfer cases draped with American flags. There are 4 service members being honored today. They are 25-year-old Captain Tyler James Feehan, 30-year-old Staff Sergeant Michael Emmanuel Swinton, 28-year-old Sergeant Angel S. Rampersad, and 19-year-old Private First Class Isabella Gonzalez. Let's bring in NBC News senior Pentagon correspondent Courtney Kube, who is out at Dover Air Force Base today. Courtney, the dignified transfer occurred a short time ago. Just to be clear with our audience, we're about to show some video of that solemn occasion. For our viewers, can you kind of walk us through what we're seeing here and what to expect?
Yeah, and a lot of people may have seen still photos of these events, but may not be familiar with exactly what happens during this dignified transfer. For starters, don't be surprised there is no audio, so you won't hear anything that's happening. That's one of the many strict, deeply followed rules that the military lays out as part of going to these events. They do not want any audio, in part to make sure that the families who are there have every semblance of privacy in this terrible moment. You will also notice that we don't see any of the family members, the next of kin. The military is also very careful to ensure that they are basically walled off from not only the delegation who's there, but any press or any other people who might be there to witness the solemn event. Because of that, you don't see or hear from any of the family members, and that may be surprising because I can tell you, we were out there, and there were many of them there. And Kate, it is a heart-wrenching event. You know, the moment that transfer case first emerges from that C-17, you hear the family members nearby. They're on the other side of a bus. You can hear the crying. You can hear the agony in their voices, because I imagine this is the first time that it really may hit them exactly what has happened. The worst, potentially one of the worst days of their lives, and they are seeing it actually become real when that transfer case walks off and those 7 U.S. soldiers walk it off of that C-17. Kate, it is a solemn event, very slow, silent, and the service members who are part of these, every time they occur, they take it very seriously. They ensure that every single possible measure is taken to make sure that those family members are not disturbed, they are not bothered, and that they can focus on their loved ones, Kate.
Courtney, I appreciate all of your insight. We're going to keep watching here. We're going to play out this tape that's coming in of the dignified transfer that happened a short time ago. Out of respect, we're not going to talk very much. We're going to have you see it all as it happened. If you're just joining us here on NBC News Now, I'm Kate Snow, and we are watching the dignified transfer of 4 U.S. service members killed in Iranian attacks in the Middle East. President Trump is joining the families of loved ones, of the 4 U.S. soldiers at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware. There's no audio on this video out of respect for those in attendance, so we'll let you watch again. We are watching a very solemn moment here from Dover Air Base. We're watching the dignified transfer of 4 U.S. service members killed at bases in the Middle East in the past week. Their transfer cases brought back to the U.S. Their families, their loved ones are there, but off camera. You saw President Trump and a lot of other authorities, including the defense secretary there at Dover Air Force Base. I want to just name the people that we have just seen arrive. We're talking about U.S. Army Captain Tyler James Feehan from Hawaii. We're talking about U.S. Army Staff Sergeant Michael Emmanuel Swinton from Fayetteville, North Carolina. Private First Class Isabella Gonzalez with the Army. Carrollton, Texas is her hometown. And Army Sergeant Angel S. Rampersad from Ozone Park, New York. I want to bring back our senior Pentagon correspondent, Courtney Kube, who is there and actually has been there through all of this. Courtney, what more are you seeing there, and what more do you want to describe for our audience?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very solemn event every time that you go to one of these. One of the differences today is there was a very high-level delegation of individuals there. As you mentioned, President Trump was leading the delegation. We had Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth there as well, the Secretary of the Army, Dan Driscoll, the Acting Army Chief of Staff, General Chris Leneve, and many other senior Pentagon officials and administration officials. Also Senator Chris Coons, who, of course, were in Dover and Delaware, and he represents this state. So that was one thing that was very different. But even with that high-level delegation, the military ensured that this still was an event that was all about the 4 individuals who were being honored here today and their families, making sure that every one of them was given their quiet procession off of that C-17, the transfer cases draped into the American flag, taken to a waiting van, and then they will be taken on to ultimately buried in their various locations. Now, there is one, in one case, that was the last one that you mentioned there, he was actually promoted, we found out posthumously, to Staff Sergeant Rampersad. He actually was listed initially as missing in action, and the military will send his remains here to Dover for further testing, DNA testing, to ensure that actually was him. That just gives you a sense, Kate, of just the brutal nature of what these soldiers were facing. He was part of the attack in Jordan last Friday that killed him and 2 others, and notably wounded at least 4 other Americans. This morning, 2 U.S. officials tell us that there are more than 500 Americans who've now been injured as part of this ongoing war with Iran, Kate.
And Courtney, I think you were just talking about Staff Sergeant Angel Rampersad, yes?
Correct, yeah. We found out actually today when we arrived here at Dover that he was being posthumously promoted to Staff Sergeant. So now all 4 of them are being posthumously promoted. He was, just for perspective here, he was, of the 4 individuals who were brought back today, he was the oldest and just at 30 years old. So it also just really hits home the human toll of this war. He was 30 years old. We had 28, 25, and just 19 years old. Those 4 people brought back today, those 4 young soldiers.
Courtney, thank you so much. I want to also bring in our NBC News White House correspondent, Monica Alba. Monica, I want to ask a little bit about what is happening in terms of the war with Iran today. The retaliatory attacks have continued between the U.S. and Iran. This morning, the president said whenever Iran shoots at a ship in the Strait of Hormuz, the U.S. will, quote, bomb and destroy one bridge or power plant in Iran. Talk about the political moment that we're in right now, and as this conflict does drag on, what is the White House saying?
Sure, Kate, and that is the backdrop to this incredibly solemn moment and event for the president and his administration, because the military conflict does continue, these strikes continue, and the escalatory language and rhetoric that we have heard from the president, from the defense secretary, who you see there in this video, appearing to chat, unclear about exactly what, before they go their separate ways and the president boards to actually head on to a political event in Georgia. But it is a reminder of the cost of this war and this conflict so far. This is the second dignified transfer that President Trump has attended this year. Vice President Vance attended an additional one. And we should just remind everybody that it is up to the families to make the heart-wrenching decision about whether they do want media coverage of their loved ones returning to the United States. And in this case, these families did decide to allow that to go forward, but it is not always the case. And so you don't necessarily see the video footage of every single dignified transfer. That is something that is done with the family's permission. And we should also point out that this is not something that was open to media coverage before 2009. That is when cameras were allowed to capture these images and to mark this moment in this way with the permission of the family. So former President Obama was the first to take part in this as a commander-in-chief. And then certainly President Trump in his first term attended several dignified transfers, as did former President Biden, and then now again President Trump in this second term. And we do know, Kate, that there appears to still be the push for some kind of diplomatic path or solution when it comes to the war against Iran. Certainly Secretary of State Marco Rubio has indicated they're open to that, even though right now it does not seem like anything is imminent to return to that tentative peace deal that was agreed to some weeks ago.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.